The sun blazed upon the battlefield of the Philistines. The giant Goliath, once a terror to Israel, lay dead, his massive sword and armour stripped, his body lifeless in the dust. And there stood David, the shepherd boy from Bethlehem, his face smeared with dirt and triumph. The people shouted his name, and in that moment a legend was born. Among those watching was Jonathan, son of King Saul, the crown prince of Israel, a warrior known for his own courage. He had faced Philistine armies before and seen God deliver victory, but this was different. As he listened to David speak to his father Saul, recounting how the Lord gave him victory over lions, bears, and finally the giant, something stirred deep in Jonathan's heart. Scripture says, "The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul." From that day, they became more than friends. They became brothers in spirit. Jonathan took off his royal robe and gave it to David, along with his sword, bow, and belt. It was more than a gift. It was a sign of covenant. In that act, the heir to the throne was saying, "I honour you. I see God's hand on you. I am with you." After David slayed Goliath, Saul didn't let him return to his family in Bethlehem. Saul wanted to keep him close, and so he did. David went wherever King Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely. Saul set him over his army, and he was accepted in everyone's sight. David's fame grew quickly. Everywhere he went, the Lord gave him victory. Songs filled the streets of Israel, specifically sang by women. Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. The melody was sweet to the people's ears, but poison to Saul's heart. Imagine being king and all your subjects sing praises to one of your subjects instead of to you. From that day, Saul looked at David with envy and suspicion. He tried to keep David close, but his jealousy only grew. One evening, as David played the harp to soothe Saul's troubled spirit, a dark rage came over the king. He hurled his spear at David, missing him by inches. The young man escaped, but the trust between them was shattered. The whole of Israel loved David because he brought them many victories, but Saul was afraid of him. Saul then promised his elder daughter Merab to David, because David was so well behaved, and he said to David, "Take my daughter, and all I require from you is that you be valiant for me and fight all the battles." David said to Saul, "Who am I that I should be son-in-law to the king?" But when the time came for David to marry Saul's daughter Merab, she was given to someone else. But luckily, Saul's other daughter, Michal, loved David. Saul was pleased when he heard his other daughter loved David, and he was happy to give her to David, but not for the reasons you'd think. He wanted her to be a trap for David. He knew what David would say, and as predicted, David said, "I'm a poor man. How am I supposed to pay the dowry of a princess?" Saul then took the opportunity to say, "I don't want anything from you, except that you win my battles and slay Philistines for me." David agreed to this because this was something doable for him, but Saul's plan was to put David at the mercy of the Philistines in battle. However, David was triumphant in every battle he fought, and it angered Saul even more. Saul wanted to kill David and would throw spears at David in an attempt to kill him, but he'd miss. Jonathan, torn between his father Saul and his friend David, could sense the danger building. He pleaded with Saul, "Let not the king sin against his servant David, for he has not sinned against you." And for a moment Saul relented. David was restored to court, but peace was short-lived. Once again, Saul's jealousy burned. He sent men to watch David's house, ready to kill him by morning. David fled into the night, his wife Michal helping him escape through a window. Left behind, David's wife Michal would dress the bed as if David was still around to keep up appearances, whenever the king's guards came to search for him. Her father sent his guards to kill David, and when they went to his house, Michal told them he was sick, but Saul insisted, saying, "Bring him on his sickbed to me, so that I may kill him myself." But when the guards returned to David's house and searched thoroughly, they found out he'd been gone all along. Alone, hunted, the hero of Israel became a fugitive. David found Jonathan and poured out his heart. "What have I done? What is my crime that your father wants to kill me?" Jonathan refused to believe it. "Far be it! My father tells me everything. He would not hide this from me." But David insisted, "Your father knows that you favour me. That's why he keeps this from you. As surely as the Lord lives, there is only a step between me and death." Jonathan's heart broke. He looked into the eyes of his friend and said, "Whatever you desire, I will do it for you." They devised a plan. David would hide in a field during the new moon feast. Jonathan would test his father's mood and send a secret signal using arrows, so David would know whether it was safe to return or flee. Before they parted, they renewed their covenant before God. Jonathan said, "May the Lord be between you and me, and between my descendants and yours forever." It was a bond stronger than family, sealed in loyalty, trust, and divine love. The feast began, and David's seat was empty. Saul said nothing the first day, but on the second day he noticed. "Where is the son of Jesse?" Saul demanded. Jonathan answered calmly, "David asked permission to go to Bethlehem for a family sacrifice." Saul's face twisted in fury. "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman! Don't you know that as long as this son of Jesse lives, your kingdom will never be established? Send for him! He must die!" Jonathan stood, his voice trembling with anger. "Why should he be killed? What has he done?" Saul's answer came in the form of a spear, thrown at his own son. Jonathan knew then that David was right. His father would never stop until David was dead. The next morning, with sorrow weighing on his soul, Jonathan went to the field with a young servant. He shot 3 arrows far beyond him and shouted, "Isn't the arrow beyond you? Hurry, go quickly." That was the secret signal. They both knew what it meant. After the servant left, David emerged from hiding. The 2 friends embraced, both weeping. David bowed to the ground 3 times before Jonathan. Their words were few, but heavy with meaning. Jonathan said, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord." And so they parted, Jonathan returning to the palace, David to the wilderness. And so David fled to a place called Nob, and there was a priest named Abimelech. Abimelech was afraid to meet David, as he wondered why David would travel alone, seeing as David was a famous man, dear to the king, and should have an escort of some sort. David lied and said he had urgent business to run for the king and had to be under cover, hence the travelling alone. David then asked if the priest had any bread, but the priests say they didn't have any regular bread except the one reserved for priests. Abimelech the priest said if they had stayed away from women the past 3 days, they could have the bread, and David answered saying, "Yes, women have been kept from us these past few days." Then the priest gave them the bread. Afterwards, David asked if the priest had any weapons, again claiming he didn't bring his sword or spear because he had to leave urgently to run the king's urgent errand. And the priest said, "The only sword around here is the one that belonged to Goliath, the giant you slew." And David said, There is none like it. I'll take it. But there was a man named Doeg. He was one of Saul's shepherds and still loyal to him. He would later take news of David's whereabouts to Saul. As soon as David took the sword, he fled to Achish, king of Gath. But David didn't count on being famous even in Gath. One of the servants of Achish recognized him and said, "Isn't this David, the king of the land? Didn't they sing songs of his victory and how he slayed 10,000s?" David was greatly troubled when he heard this. He immediately changed his behavior to liken that of a madman in order to throw them off. On seeing this, Achish said to his servants, "Why have you brought a madman to me? Have I any need of madmen?" David's strategy had worked, and he used this cover to flee again, and this time he fled to a cave named Adullam, where his brethren from his father's house joined him. Along with his family, other outcasts joined him, and he led them. They were about 400 men. David had become a man on the run. From cave to cave, desert to desert, he fled from Saul's relentless pursuit. But even in exile, he found men who rallied to him, discontented debtors and outcasts. Under David's leadership, they became a mighty army. In the uncertainty of this lifestyle, David went to the king of Moab and asked for his parents to stay with him till David knew what God planned for him. Meanwhile, Saul found out from Doeg where David was and what he was up to, and Saul was mad with rage. He asked his men why they never told him his son was conspiring to free David. While this interrogation was ongoing, Doeg told Saul of everything that happened between David and Abimelech the priest, how the priest gave David bread and armed him with Goliath's sword. This further infuriated King Saul, and he sent for Abimelech and the other priests. When they arrived, Saul ordered his men to slay all the priests for supporting David. But they wouldn't lay a hand on the priests, so Saul ordered Doeg to slay the priests, and he slayed over 80 people that day, including women, children, and animals. But one of Abimelech's sons escaped. His name was Abiathar. Abiathar fled towards David and told him of Saul's actions to the priests. David replied, "I knew it that day when Doeg was there that he'd tell Saul." Then David urged Abiathar to stay with him, saying, "He who seeks my life seeks yours too. Stay with me and do not be afraid. With me you'll be safe." Saul heard that David had gone to fight for Keish and went there to kill David, but had to leave in order to fight the Philistines instead. Yet David never raised a hand against Saul. Twice he had the chance to end Saul's life, once in a cave and once when Saul slept in his camp. But both times David said, "I will not touch the Lord's anointed." In fact, David cut a piece of Saul's cloak, but his heart struck him and he couldn't kill Saul. He said Saul was anointed of the Lord and like a father to him. David forbade his servants from raising a hand against the king, and when the king went out, David went after him and said, "My lord, the king." When Saul looked back, David bowed himself and said, "Where did you hear that I seek to do you harm? The Lord delivered you into my hand. My men convinced me, but I wouldn't kill you. Look, my father, I have a piece of your cloak in my hand, for I cut it off but would not kill my lord, the Lord's anointed. You can see that there is no evil in my hands, but you still seek my soul to kill it." David ended this by saying, "The Lord's be judge between me and thee, and avenge me of thee." And when David finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is this thy voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded you evil. And you have showed this day how that you have dealt well with me, for as much as when the Lord had delivered me into your hand, you didn't kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, Will he let him go well away? As a result, the Lord reward thee good for what you have done unto me this day. And now, behold, I know well that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear now, therefore, unto me by the Lord, that you wilt not cut off my seed after me, and that you wilt not destroy my name out of my father's house. So David swore unto Saul, and Saul went home, but David and his men gat them up unto the hold. And through it all Jonathan remained faithful. He found David one last time in the wilderness of Ziph, when David's strength was failing. Scripture says, Jonathan went to David and strengthened his hand in God. He told him, Do not be afraid. My father will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be next to you. They renewed their covenant once more before the Lord, and those would be the last words they shared face to face. The Philistines gathered again for war. Saul and his sons fought bravely on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, but the battle turned against Israel. Jonathan fell that day, alongside his brothers and his father Saul. The royal line was struck down in one blow. When word reached David, he tore his clothes and wept. His voice echoed through the hills of Ziklag as he sang, Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You were very dear to me. Your love to me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. David's lament was not just for a fallen friend. It was for a brother, a kindred spirit, and a covenant that death itself could not erase. Years later, when David became king, he remembered his covenant with Jonathan. He searched for anyone left of Saul's family, asking, Is there anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? And they brought him Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, lame in both feet. David restored to him all the land that belonged to Saul, and said, You shall always eat at my table. In that moment, the covenant lived on. Through mercy, through remembrance, through love that outlasted time. The story of Jonathan and David is not just about friendship. It's about loyalty that defies politics, love that conquers jealousy, and faith that holds firm even when the world collapses. Jonathan, the prince who could have clung to power, chose faithfulness. David, the warrior destined for greatness, chose honour. Together, they painted a portrait of brotherhood that still speaks today. True friendship is not about power. It's about covenant. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe for daily Bible storytelling videos.